Hello, welcome pen friends. Welcome to another singles ink profile. Today we're doing Herbin Encre Lierre Sauvage, which translates to wild ivy. It's just this really awesome green. It's actually what I really think of as real green. So let's dive right in. Let's put it in the water test and see how it does. And then we'll talk about the last one just briefly. Okay, so the last ink that I did was profile for you was Birmingham Luna Park Marmalade, and it did turn out to be very, very typical fountain pen ink, and you can barely faintly read it, but not really. I mean, I don't think you can on the camera, and I can barely, and I know what it says. So, and then on the clean out scale, it got an A. It was super easy to clean out. You could tell that was going to happen. Okay, so let's let that work while we're talking. And we'll get into the Rhodia Gold Book ink journal that I'm keeping and start looking at this pretty ink. Okay, here it is right here. It just did fantastic stuff on the Tomoe River 52-gram sample that I glued in. It showed a lot of interest and shading and stuff. And then here it is in the broad nib and in the Lamy fine nib, and then I kind of hopped back in the broad nib just to write Wild Ivy. I was excited to find out, what that meant, the words there. So, okay, I did find it available at Jet Pens, and then I didn't look any further. I'm sure it's available a lot of other places, but I liked that tiny little bottle. Let's see, and that's actually how mine came. And thank you very much to pen friend KS, who provided this, sent this wonderful little bottle. It's a 10 ml bottle. And to me, that's like the perfect size to find out, do I like this, and to work with it for a long time without, if we get into a large 90 ml bottle and we're not sure. So I didn't write anything further down because that would be the source probably. I have to order from there. Listen to me, quite often for myself and my husband. And then, okay, they did have the 6 cartridges, the standard international shorts, for $6 for 6 of those. You get it, of course, it's a better deal to buy the little bottle. And then I think there's a bigger bottle, but I just didn't get that far. So my first impressions, wow. Right away, flow was the first thing I noticed. And I really like an ink that's not shy about flowing out of the pens. So that was just my very first wow, was how well it, flowed. And then it's just a bright, beautiful green. Here's the chromatography. I thought that was neat too, how it separated it. It did kind of leave a little bit here, so I'm interested to see what happens in the bath test. And then it moved right up, and it kind of turned to a lime green and a teal, so that was very interesting. Okay, lot to cover here, so. Oh wait, I wanted to hop back right off the bat before we go too much further. I wanted to hop back to Tasha Midori, which is a darker green. It made me think of it, and we'll see it on the panel too, but that's darker. And then another one, and there's a full profile of this one. And then, amazingly, 3 Oysters Jong Jade. Now that doesn't resemble it as much on the panel as it does coming out of the nib, and yet I don't remember that fantastic flow with this ink like I do notice with the Herbin. So, okay, moving right along, we have the little Morriman spiral notebook to look at. I thought it looked really pretty on here. Started seeing a little shading here. I would call the shading that I did see subtle, but here it is in the broad nib, and then on down into the Lamy fine nib. And I'm using just regular Yo-O nibs in terms of the broad nib, and then this is a Lamy fine nib, so that in case you're not in here watching all the time. I liked how that looked. Oh, I had a little problem here where I had lifted something and ripped that paper on the back, but I don't see bleed through. There could have been, though, on that painted on part. That's too bad. I destroyed my sample. Oh my goodness. Okay, here is the CVS caliber 4x6 little memo pad. And I avoided that area because since we had the marmalade bleeding through there, that makes me think of jelly or jam. Okay, so the ink lightened a little on this paper, but it didn't bother me because of the superior flow of it. So if you are a fan of CVS caliber paper, you probably also know that you have to kind of pick and choose your inks and whether or not it's going to fade out or get real dry on here, and it didn't. It didn't get dry. It just was a little bit lighter, and it didn't bleed through. You have heavy shadowing. That's all. Huh? Very interesting. Okay, so on to the Leuchtturm. If I can remember right, it flattened out on here in terms of painting it on, but it still looked really pretty on this paper. Here's the broad nib. We got some shading, and then not so much in the fine nib of shading, but it's just a pleasant. Okay, it tried to react with the ink on the back, but I wouldn't really ding it for that. It didn't seem like it was too bothersome. Now, you notice that it just isn't quite as interesting looking there. That's why I like to do the painted on part, because it just amazes me that this cheap CVS caliber paper can show the ink off still. And it has its drawbacks, but it'll never stop amazing me, I guess, that it can do that. Okay, given the price. Okay, here's the Live Notes Tomoe River paper, little insert booklet by by Pen Gallery, 68 GSM paper. And then here we go. Now, yeah, maybe it flattened out a little on there, but it's still a nice bright green. And you get some shading, very subtle shading. And you get some interest in the painted on part. Here's the broad nib and the fine nib. Let's look back and see. It didn't go through. So there's a nice advantage. Even where it was painted on, it didn't go through. Okay, I like to keep that handy because we're going to hop right on to Tomoe River paper 52 gram onto the white. And there you see a lot of, wow, it just spent. I love how that looks and dries, but if I remember right, it may have gone through, so we'll flip it over in a minute. Okay, you get more shading on this paper. That's nice in the broad nib. Not so much in the fine nib. But, again, a nice bright green. Just, it makes me think of summer. Okay, it went through a little. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. Painted on. Let's compare the two, just for the heck of it. And that's where it shows me what I like to see is this, even though it went through. So you got the drawback. It went through the Tomoe River 52 grams. So if I'm art journaling or whatever, I have to know that if I'm going to get crazy with it, with a paintbrush, it's probably going to go through. And then it didn't on the 68 GSM. So, and it didn't look quite as spectacular on that in terms of what it does shading wise. Okay, on to Clairefontaine 90 gram French ruled paper, where I noticed even more shading in the written portion, and I liked how that looked. Wow, it just looks really nice on that white paper, doesn't it? And it, it did a good showing on the painted on part too. Just tilt it a little toward the natural light. That helps us see what it really, shows itself as. So broad nib, shading is present a little more than usual. And then fine nib. And it doesn't go through that wonderful paper, so that's good. Okay, on to Rhodia. Rhodia 80 gram dot pad. Ah, all of a sudden the light outside shifted. Okay. There it is painted on, and here we are in the nib, and there's a little subtle shading throughout this broad nib portion. And then here we are in the fine nib. Okay. No bleed through. Nice. And then on to our cheapy paper where, it just flattens right out on here. Doesn't do much spectacular, but you can definitely see it. Nice green and everything. Let's see. Maybe we should compare. I mean, it's not fair to compare it, but you see how it just changes things. It lightens up some and it flattens out a little bit on this paper. And it does feather on here. And then it looks fairly decent coming out of the Lamy fine nib. This is Georgia Pacific 20-pound copy paper. Sorry, I'm getting the horses ahead of the cart here. Okay, so we had quite a bit of bleed through with the broad nib, a little bit with the fine nib, and then, you know, where it's painted on, that's real normal for that to happen with this paper. Okay, let's stop in and look. Aha, now, okay, I wasn't sure if it was going to do this. It does look like we're going to have a little bit of readability left. We lost the green, and we've got the underlying kind of, and that, you know, there was a little hint there in the chromatography. I'm finally getting it, why people like chromatography. I like it now, too. Oh, boy, I'm showing my, you know, my little feathers there where I'm still kind of a newbie. You know, even after 3 years, there's a lot to learn. And when I was a teenager writing with fountain pens, I didn't even know how to clean my pen much and keep it writing. So this is I've come a long way. Okay, I'm excited about this. Here's our panel, and I need to get it where we can see it. I thought I had adjusted that. Okay, so I did come down a little too far probably with the screen. But next time we'll adjust that better. Okay, I think you can still see it. Well, okay, that's better. That was going to make me nuts. So now we've got all the colors in the viewfinder here. Right in the middle is our ink of the day. J. Herbin Encre Lierre Sauvage, Wild Ivy. And this is where the surprises started, okay? KWZ Green number 5, that didn't surprise me. I thought right away of that ink, how much it reminded me of that. And that's my go-to true green ink that I want to write with when I'm thinking about green, you know, basic, regular green, like in kindergarten. So that didn't surprise me. But then I started realizing, wow, Three Oysters Jong Jade. When I looked back into the ink journal and realized it looked a lot like that in the writing samples, and it didn't necessarily here. So that's something to keep in mind. Another reason to always get a sample. Let's see. Surprisingly to me, Tasha Midori seems a lot darker. And when I flip back onto writing samples, that proved to be true. It is quite a bit more saturated and darker, and it almost goes toward forest green rather than that bright classic green, or however we want to describe it. I do remember the flow was excellent with the Tasha ink, though, so that was something that will never leave my mind about those inks. That's an overall impression now that I have. I was super surprised that I hadn't done a full profile yet on KWZ Green number 5. I could have sworn I had, but I'm not finding it. So it's that's something I want to do because I love that ink. I had a large sample. When I say large sample, I must have had at least 10 mils of that total, and I really love it. So, okay, Sherwood Green, which is another one that is darker and is more of a foresty green, and it has red sheen, so that, you know, that makes it different, but something that you may be familiar with. And then down here I have this is one of my only green bottles, which is Blackstone Daintree Green. Much, much more saturated and dark, closer to Midori, and lots of red sheen on that one. Just fantastic. Wow, this was really fun because, again, I think some of you know, I would have told you, oh, I don't really like green ink out of a fountain pen, and I'm not all that green oriented toward writing, but that has totally changed since I started doing these ink profiles and really using the ink samples from Ink Journal and you know, testing them out. I've fallen in love with green inks, and I have so many samples, which is a lucky thing. Okay, so going brighter. Brighter is Noodler's Gruen Cactus Eel here in the bottom right-hand corner. That's an interesting one I put there for contrast, for showing you how much lighter, brighter that is. And then Pelikan Edelstein Adventurin. That is a pretty ink. And I believe that that's, you know, very, very similar coming out of the nibs too. It gets a little harder to distinguish those differences when you get them in the nib. So this was super fun. I could probably talk on and on about this, but what I did was take the larger 12 by 12 panel and I knocked it down to 10 by 10 to get it closer to what we were used to when I was using the 9 by 9 inch watercolor papers that I did the panels on. But this is saving me so much time. Thank you again to pen friend Bill, who sent these little corners and you know, like elaborated on some ideas he had about this, which just totally, yeah, I realized right away this is the way to go. So let's look at the visual journal. Okay, and it was really pretty in here. It didn't have as much complexity as, say, Three Oysters Jong Jade, where it was like, I don't know if you remember that one. There it is down right here. That one did have a lot of complexity and was really suitable to art. And I would say this is kind of in the middle somewhere, where you do get a little bit of contrast, some lighter green and some yellow coming out, but not as much. But it wanted to work with me, except for here I made a mistake, and then I came in with a paintbrush and, you know, no, there's no mistakes. Here I was pleased with this portion of it. I thought that was neat. The trees kind of gave that illusion of trees and grass and everything. And then over here, it just went wild. Just went wild, but that's what the fun is seeing what happens, how it reacts to the water. And this is the Nick Stewart technique, but this is me, you know, a very amateurish technique, you know, brand new to that, really. So, what did you think of J. Herbin Encre Lierre Sauvage? I like it. I like it a lot, just for the superior flow and the color of it. You know, even though it's not all that complex. And I'm not in the market for green bottled ink. I've already got the darker Blackstone Daintree green I've got in a bottle, thanks to another pen friend. And then I had purchased Monteverde California Teal, which is, you know, just much darker, and it can play tricks in terms of, is it green, is it blue, you know, that kind of thing. Tranquility, which is way out there into the blue greens. So I'm super, super happy this little bottle's going to come out more to play. And Froggy was happy too, because he found a nice little match there. So I keep him on my desk. Can't remember where I got it. But I'd love to hear in the comments what you think of this ink. This is one that really got me interested, got me back looking at all these beautiful greens. And there are plenty more to profile, so I'll see you back here with another one of these days soon. Bye for now.